You have dedicated over 35 years of your life to speaking up for the rights of the unborn. During this time, you've had eggs thrown, punches thrown, you've spent over 18 months in jail 6 different times. Why do you do what you do?
In the last 50 years, we have seen by far the greatest slaughter of human life in history. And it is happening right here amongst us every day. I feel I can't personally be silent about that.
Generally, the Western world accepts abortion. How do we change public perception, policy? Where do we go from here?
That's a very good question, Scott.
In this interview, we're going to talk about a heavy topic. And right up front, we want you to know that God loves you, that he paid a great price for you. And that price, his son on the cross, is enough. Today, I'm really excited to be with you, Graham. About 9 years ago, I sat across the table, myself and my wife, with you and your wife, Liz, and we heard your story, both you and Liz, your life story. And I don't think I've heard as inspiring story in a long time. And I'm really excited for your story to be told. So you have dedicated over 35 years of your life to speaking up for the rights of the unborn. During this time, you've had eggs thrown, punches thrown, you've received over $18,000 of fines. You've spent over 18 months in jail, 6 different times in jail. Why do you do what you do?
For me, it all turns on what is abortion all about? What happens when an abortion is done? It's quite different to anything else. If I were to stand in the street with a sign saying every tooth has the right to life and a picture of a tooth, people would just think I was crazy, but probably nobody would get angry and I wouldn't go to jail. But once you talk about the life of the child in the womb and say that they need to be protected and cared for, that, for some reason, makes some people very angry. And they want to close you down, they want to stop you from speaking up for them. And I think the fact that it upsets some people is an indication of just how important this is, because why is it that people feel that they don't want you to speak on behalf of the children? And I think that's an indication that deep down in all our hearts, we all know that the child in the womb is a fellow human being like the rest of us, equal value to us. And I think people feel very perhaps guilty because of their involvement with abortion, and they don't know how to handle that. And if somebody speaks up on behalf of the children, they want to say, no, you can't do that. I feel I can't personally be silent about that. As you say, it was nearly 40 years ago that somebody handed me a leaflet. I was about 30 at the time. I had never even really thought much about abortion at all. I was a Christian, but I was very naive about this subject. But as it happened, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and it both struck us very powerfully. What is going on? Children just like the one she was carrying were being killed. How could this happen in our civilized society? And so we thought, well, we can't just be silent. We were students ourselves at the time at a Christian college and planning to work overseas. And we thought, well, before we go, we've got to at least do something. We can't just say nothing. And so even though those leaflets literally made me sick to the stomach to think about what they were saying, and initially I just put them aside. I didn't even want to look at them. But I couldn't forget. And so I eventually took them down one day and read them through carefully, my wife and I. And it changed our lives, took a completely different direction to what we were expecting.
Yeah, so that was how it began for you. And this was 40 years ago, 1985.
Yeah.
And it was a leaflet I've read in a chapter that you've given me. So there's a forthcoming book that's got a big part of your story. And
yes.
As you said just then, that at the start they made you sick, but you couldn't deal with it, so you put the leaflet somewhere else.
Yes.
But later on, this is what you say: "Yet I couldn't bring myself to throw them away either. So as a compromise, I placed them out of sight on a high shelf and tried to forget about what I read." But you obviously picked them up again. And so what happened then? Because this was a big decision for your life, and this is how it's gone since. Did you feel the Lord saying to you, this is what you're going to do? Or what was that moment like when you looked at the leaflets again?
Yeah, well, I think it was God speaking to us, because we couldn't put it aside. It would have been relatively easy, I would have thought, to do that. But No, we couldn't do that. And so we felt that we had to do something with this. And because they'd made such a big impact on our lives, we thought other people were just ignorant like we were. And if people were informed, then things would change. And so we imported a lot of those leaflets from America and distributed them widely throughout the state of Queensland through the churches. And we thought, well, that's all we were going to do. We thought, well, we did something. And we thought we would then go on with the plans that we already had for our lives.
Oh, so you didn't think this was going to be a 40-year journey at that point. You just thought, we need to do something about this, and you got the leaflets and produced them. Can you also tell us what was in these leaflets? That really was it showing how a surgical abortion is done?
Oh, they did, but I mean, one of them was titled "Children, Things We Throw Away?" ?
Wow.
And we thought about that. How can it be that people can deliberately get rid of the child that they have conceived, their own children? And that's what astonished us more than anything, that people could do this to their own children. And we thought, well, there's something wrong here. We need to speak up on behalf of these children. They can't speak for themselves, and somebody had to be an advocate for them. And so that's what we decided we would do, and that was our initial response. But our plans for working overseas fell through, and it was then that we thought, well, we were challenged by others to say, well, maybe this is what we ought to be doing. And so we started to work with pro-life advocacy, and we were school teachers ourselves, and that was our background. Neither of us had any sort of background in this area, and we sort of didn't really know what we were going to do, how we would go about it. But we got a team of people together and did all sorts of pro-life advocacy. And
what did that look like? What kind of things did you do?
Oh, well, we wanted to get it out and before the public. Yeah. So we held events called Life Chains. And the first year we had 2,000 people lined up along Coronation Drive in Brisbane. And we thought, wow, that was wonderful. So the next year we got more signs printed. We thought we might get 5,000, but we only got 1,000 the next year.
So what does that look like, a life chain you call it?
Oh, a life chain. It was just people holding signs. A lot of them said abortion kills children. And then there was other signs saying Jesus heals and forgives. And so we wanted to have both sides of the message, saying both that this is wrong, but also, and we always emphasise this whenever we talk, that we want people to realise that abortion is not the unforgivable sin. Jesus does heal and forgive.
Yes.
And everybody needs to face up to what is done. It's no good just trying to sweep this under the carpet and trying to forget about it. And that's why we're willing to go out onto the streets. We know it does hurt some people to see this, and that's the last thing they want to do is remember what they have done.
Yes.
But if they never face up to what it is, then they will not seek forgiveness and have their lives restored. And so we see it is, despite the fact that it hurts some people, we feel that it is still necessary for their benefit and also for the benefit of other people who will see, well, I'm not going to go down that track. And so we want to save lives and restore lives.
Yes, because it's almost, sometimes you hear people say, look, I understand this is an issue and we don't want to kill the unborn, but we need to stay silent or quiet because this is really going to hurt people that have had an abortion or have participated in an abortion. But of course, that's not the answer, because what you're saying is if you're hiding it, how are you ever going to get healed from that? And it's very interesting. One of our other guests, Diane Grocott, I was just speaking to her, and she was speaking to you as well, who's a clinical psychologist. She was saying, and she's very good at explaining things in simple terms, she was saying that if you're going to go to the land or the world of parenthood, so you're on the way there, but you don't want to go, then the issue is a parent never kills their child. And that really hit me when she said that. She said a parent never kills her child, never kills her or his child. So what you need to do is dehumanize. It needs to not be a child. But of course, deep in people's hearts, deep in our hearts, we know it is a child. And you were telling me earlier that actually the scientific evidence is quite clear for this fact. You were telling me about embryologists. Embryologists, that's it. So an embryologist is someone who looks at from conception until birth, is that right? And so what's the consensus of is a fetus or when it becomes a baby in the womb, an embryologist says it is a life from the start. Is that right?
Well, I think it's the first 8 weeks that embryologist specialises in.
Right.
That's what the period where it's called an embryo.
Yes.
Yeah, and certainly that is the case, that human embryologists almost universally agree that life begins at conception, and that there's no real argument about that at all from their perspective.
Yes, and it was very interesting you also saying that in some of these big court cases, and many people will be aware of Roe versus Wade, that was in the 70s, is that correct?
That's right.
And so that was the American case for abortion being legalized. Mm-hmm. But you were telling me that in the court, they didn't actually, is that correct? They didn't have an embryologist?
I'm not sure about that 100%, but there were certainly scientists who did testify to the humanity of the unborn child from the beginning. But Chief Justice Blackmun, he said, we don't need to decide whether they're human or not, whether they're alive. And which was quite ridiculous, because the whole point of it is to say, should these lives of these children be allowed to be taken or not? And he said, we don't even need to decide even if they're human or not, if they're alive. And so without coming to a decision on that point, they said you can go ahead and have abortion legalised, and which is quite ridiculous, because we always make the point that if a person, for example, were to go out hunting and they shot another hunter, and when they were taken to court, they said, I thought it might have been a deer, that would not be accepted as a justifiable excuse, because they are required to ensure before they pull the trigger that what they're shooting is a deer and not another hunter. And to just simply say, I thought it might have been a deer, isn't good enough. Mm. They've got to be certain. We would say the same is obviously true with abortion. Mm. The case has to be proven by those who would do abortion that they are not killing a human being. The onus of proof must be on them. And if they cannot prove that they are not killing a fellow human being, then prudence demands that we must say, no, until there is proof there is not killing a human being, you've got to give the benefit of the doubt to the child and let them live. And so we would say that all the evidence is in our favour, that these are children, these are human beings, and so there is no justification whatever to say, we don't know, therefore we can just do it. No, the evidence is that they are human beings, and therefore they must not be killed. Yeah,
and so this is the whole question: is the baby in the womb a human? Mm. And the embryologists are saying unequivocally yes.
That's right.
But the law courts say we can't answer this question, and that's likely because they know the answer is yes, but to allow the abortion to occur, that's the only thing. And that's exactly the same thing that we were talking about earlier that happens in the parents' minds.
Yeah.
That I can't go to the land of parenthood, therefore I need this to not be a child, because a parent doesn't kill their child. Yeah. But really, deep in our hearts, we know that what the truth is. And because of that, this sticks with people and it's nagging. And just as you said earlier, the forgiveness is needed, but the recognition of the sin is needed first. Yeah. And we want people to know that there is forgiveness available. The reason we're being so clear and talking about this now is because we want them to come out of this difficult place, this hiding. And you've seen on the street, so at the moment, I want to go back to your story, but just quickly going to the work you do now on the street, you hold up these signboards, and we'll put a photo up for the viewers to see the kind of signboards you hold up in busy intersections. But you see people that are not at that stage of saying it was a human and yes, I did kill it, because they might know it in their hearts, but they react when they see those signboards. And what can you tell us about that, and what does that look like?
Well, yes, get a whole range of responses when people see because I hold a picture of an unharmed 8-week-old baby, and along with various signs I use. Currently I'm using one that says, everyone has the right to life, Article 3, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so you get, I use that sign because for secular people, that's sort of the secular morality, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And yet it is clearly on our side. It's saying that everyone has the right to life, and people will dispute that. And I mean, Australia is signatory to that document. Officially, the government says that we support this. And yet I've been fined $3,000 for holding that sign in a street.
Wow.
So
So the sign that says everyone has a right to life.
Yep, alongside the picture of the
alongside
baby.
a picture of the baby.
For having those two pictures, I've been arrested and fined $3,000 for doing that. So
Yeah, wow.
I've got to say that it was outside an abortion clinic,
Yeah.
but apparently the Universal Declaration of Human Rights doesn't apply near abortion clinics because...
Yeah. And something really interesting, I was fortunate enough to come out with you last week and just be on the signboards with you. And something you said to me then was interesting. You said that if I were to hold up one of these signs, that everyone has the right to life, no one would have a problem. People would cheer. It'd be good. Or if you was to hold up probably even just the sign of the baby, that might be okay as well. Maybe not so much.
Maybe
okay.
not.
Maybe just the first one then,
Yep.
that everyone has a right to life. Then people
No
agree
arguments.
to that.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's the baby in the womb, the picture of a baby in the womb.
That's right.
That's the thing that does it when it's next to it. Yeah. So I just want to go back to your stories to make sure
Sure.
we cover this. So you've got the leaflet by Keith Green. You didn't want to look at it at first. Then you eventually got it down, looked at it, were impacted by it. You and your wife decided we're going to distribute leaflets like this because other Christians need to be aware that this is what happens in an abortion and just to the reality of it. From there, you don't think you're going to continue on this route of fighting for the rights of the unborn, but you end up leading an advocacy group and you have these life chains you were talking about. And so are we in the 80s now or the 90s?
This would be in the early 90s.
Early 90s, yeah. And so what, and you were doing various other activities as well.
All sorts of different things.
Can you tell us about them? Or?
Oh, well, we, after being involved in activism for a couple of years, we realised that we couldn't simply be saying abortion is wrong without offering help. And so that was the next big step, was to think about setting up a crisis pregnancy centre. And again, that was something we had no experience with and took us a couple of years to gather together a group of people, do some training and find premises. And we set up a centre, and next year will be the 30th anniversary since the centre was opened. And my wife continues to head that up.
And that's in Brisbane, Australia.
Yeah,
it's called
Brisbane.
Priceless House?
Priceless House, yes.
Priceless House. And so it's an emergency pregnancy counselling centre.
Yeah, we provide practical support and counsel to couples, women who find themselves in difficulty due to unexpected pregnancy.
Yeah, and something that made me think this is particularly needed now was because we have the ability to have a pill to abort the baby, but it has to be taken before 7 weeks. Is that right?
Well, 9 weeks of
9
pregnancy, but that's 7 weeks since conception, yeah.
And usually a woman would only know 4 weeks after conceiving. So it leaves only 3 weeks to make the decision. Is that right?
At the most, yes.
Yeah.
By the time she realises she's pregnant, she has to make a decision quite quickly, yes.
And this could be a really big, disastrous decision. And so to have help on hand very quickly is needed.
Oh, yes, and this is one of the challenges for the crisis pregnancy centres, because there's centres like ours all around Australia in different cities and towns, and because all pro-lifers recognise that we need to be providing assistance. Yeah. And but it has become more difficult to get the word out over the years, just because it's so simple now. If a woman finds herself pregnant, she just Googles abortion clinic and takes her straight there. And it's hard for us to get in front of them to let them know that there is
another option, yeah.
So
because you provide practical support. I've heard Priceless House provide things like nappies, changing tables, like prams, all the things, prams, all these items that would surely go as an expense and a thing to do, and to take some of that burden off.
Yeah, we give them assistance right up to the baby's first birthday. So
yes. And this is a common question, but I feel like it's a good place to ask it, Graham, is a lot of people talking about the issue of abortion. A lot of it is people saying that they're pro-choice because of the economic burden of the baby and them not being able to afford a good life for it. And how do you answer that type of question?
Well, we would like to go back one step as well. And I mean, rather than in the particular instance where we have someone sitting in front of us, we just want to encourage people to be prepared to take responsibility for their behaviour, because we feel that this is one of the main things, because simply after the fact trying to help is good, but we also need to try to encourage people to not get themselves into that difficult situation in the first place.
Yes.
And so we want to encourage people to take responsibility for their behaviour. And so if they are not in a position where they can raise a child themselves, then they've either got to be prepared to have their child adopted if they can't do that, or they're going to have, the difficulties that come with single parenthood and so on. And so to avoid that, we say, well, be more careful about your situation and don't put yourself in a position where these things are going to be very difficult for you. But if they have done that, then, that is, in Australia, there is a lot of groups prepared to assist people in difficulty. And so it's not perfect, but there are a lot of people who will assist.
Yeah, great. And so you and your wife, well, I think it's Liz, your wife, that heads that up, and that's been going for 30 years now.
Yes.
Same Priceless House. And so maybe you can tell us what comes next in the line, but I know it is about that time that you decided to go back to university, and you were about 40 at the time, I think.
Yes, that's right. I went to university to study philosophy, and I went to the University of Queensland and particularly majored in ethics. I was looking at was there a secular basis for ethics, and I did a lot of work in that area and went on and did honours in that area also. And it was very interesting, and to be a Christian pro-lifer in a secular university was a particular challenge, but it was good. I mean, I took my hat off to the lecturers who were all atheists, that so long as I could present my case well, they were prepared to give me fair marks. So it was quite an experience, but it confirmed to what I thought before I went, that in the absence of God, there is no basis for ethics. It's morality has no grounding, and it really just comes down to a matter of personal preferences. And so that was very interesting, and that, I don't know if it's the time to mention this, but subsequently it led me to writing, because meeting a lot of people who say that they're atheists or whatever, it occurred to me it's a very simple thing to say. Anybody can say they're an atheist, but people they really think about what the implications of atheism are, what logically follows, should it be true. And so I thought I would, for young people, just write, because a lot of people don't like to read books, so I just wrote some comics and illustrated them on various aspects of what does it mean, should atheism be true. And I have that now, and I have a website with that on there.
And that's Atheism for Teens and Kids.
Atheism for Kids and Teens.
Kidsandteens.com. I like the name of it too.
I've tried to keep it simple.
Yeah, I tried, but keeping it simple, yeah. No, I took a look at them and I really like them. So I encourage others to check that out. But so you've gone to university to study this, to try and understand what the secular point of view is and see if there's a secular basis for morality. And you said you found there wasn't. But can I ask, because one of the arguments we hear a lot from the pro-choice, pro-abortion side is, well, it's just a clump of cells. You say, well, you're just a clump of cells as well.
Right. Big clump.
Yeah, a big clump. And really that's where we look at the creation aspect to this, is, are we creating God's image or not? And is that a type of conversation, because you obviously have a lot of conversations with people on the street as you're holding these signboards, does the conversation come around creation, and are you created by, has a God created you, or are you just evolved? Does that conversation come up a lot?
Not as often as I would like.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people who stop just want to tell me off and aren't open to conversation, but there are those that do. And yes, it does come around to that. And because it's not sufficient just to say that the baby is alive, because other animals we kill and feel that that's okay. And so if the child is just another animal, like a a cow or a pig or something, we're quite prepared and think it's morally acceptable to end those animals' lives. People can say, well, it's just another animal. Why is it the big deal? And it is if it's only if the child has some intrinsic value from being made in God's image, that means that, no, you just can't kill them. They're not just another animal. There's something uniquely special about them.
So Liz is running, your wife is running Priceless House, and you finish your degree in philosophy, and whilst you're doing that, I think you're just doing it part-time, because whilst you're doing it, you're still partaking in the activism. What does activism look like at this point, and what do you go on to next?
Well, at that point, it was just trying to generate public awareness and getting people out onto the streets as much as we could, with varying degrees of success.
But holding the signboards up, that didn't get you in jail, is that
Not
right?
at that point, no. Because it was around this time that another piece of literature crossed my path, a book called Shattering the Darkness by an American minister called Joseph Foreman. And that book really challenged me greatly. And Joseph argued that if Christians are going to say that abortion takes the life of a fellow human being, like you were saying earlier, we need to act like that's true and not just simply say these words. And he was part of a movement in America at the time in the late 80s, in the late 90s. In late 90s, I think it was, that was involved in nonviolent direct action in front of the doors of the abortion clinics. And a few of us here in Brisbane read the book and were greatly challenged by it. And in 2002, we began to take these nonviolent direct actions in front of the doors of the abortion clinics, just simply sitting in front of the doors and refusing to move.
Yeah. So you live in, just for the audience, because they'll be from all around the world.
Yes.
You live in Brisbane, Queensland, and there was, at this time, 2002, there were 4 abortion clinics.
4 abortion clinics doing surgical abortions. This is
in the city
before
of
the
Brisbane.
abortion pill had been come into use.
Yep.
And so, yes, there were those 4 abortion clinics, and we would go in front of each of those, and obviously that resulted in lots of arrests and court cases, convictions.
And what did that look like? So you turn up at I think you'd make an appointment, is that right? At the abortion clinic, you'd turn up there and you'd sit in the middle of the doorway and say, look, because basically you're saying, this is real. You're going to kill a child, and I don't want you to kill that child. I'm going to get in the way. And you called it non-violent direct action. Is that correct?
Yes, we didn't take this lightly because it's a very serious thing to act in defiance of the law, civil disobedience. And so I had a lot of soul searching and thinking and talking to people before we were prepared to do this. But basically it just boiled down to the logic of, if you're walking down the street and you heard somebody drowning in a swimming pool, but there's a sign up saying no trespassing, would we say, well, no trespassing, we can't go in, we can't help? Or would we say, well, no, somebody's dying here, the sign says we can't go in, but it's more important to help the dying person than it is to obey the no trespassing law. And so we believe that same principle would hold with abortion. We know that there's children going to be killed in this place here today, and we will go and intervene and put ourselves between the abortionist and the baby and not move. So that's what we would do, and that was the rationale for it. And so
it started in 2002, and you did that how many times?
Probably we held about 60 sit-ins over the next 10 years.
Yeah. And so you would sit in and try to prevent the death of these children.
Yeah, by just our presence. We wouldn't physically attack anybody. And so, yes, and if there's one thing courts don't like, it's repeat offenders and appearing before the same magistrates over and over. Eventually it resulted in getting jail terms and spending time in jail,
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this interview, you might be interested to know that we also produce the world's most widely read magazine on the creation-evolution debate, Creation Magazine. It's packed with beautifully illustrated articles showing how real science supports the Bible. It's designed for the whole family and is a great tool for strengthening your faith. Sign up now to receive 4 issues per year. Follow the link in the description.
Now, you mentioned this briefly, but I think another side effect of you doing that action is, and this is one thing you said to me when I first met you and deeply inspired me, was if people are going to see us and understand that we really believe this is true, then we need to act like it. And I immediately thought, well, that's the same with the gospel. If this is really true, that there's eternal heaven and there's eternal hell, then we need to act like this is true. So I think for Christians in general, even if we're not called to a life of pro-life activism, although I think you and me would agree that as Christians we have a responsibility to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Mm-hmm. I think it's even in Proverbs, a verse that says something similar to that. But even if we're not called in the same way you are, we are called to live as though the gospel is really true, and also live as though these people, these babies are alive, and that they're real humans. So over these 60 sit-ins, you had a number of times in court and in jail. Can you tell us how that looked? Were you nervous about getting arrested, going to jail? What was the discussions like with your wife about this?
There's a few questions there, but again, that was when we started the actions. We had no idea where it would lead to and what the outcome would be.
You must have known that was a possibility.
Oh, of course, we knew that would be inevitable if we continued to do them. But you start the first day and you just don't know where it's going to take you. Up until that point, I don't think I'd had one speeding ticket, and that was the only time I'd ever had to cross paths with the police ever. And so this was something new to interact with the police like this. And they didn't know what to make of us either. And so it was...
new for both of you.
Yeah, it was very, very strange
police
situation.
Police and activists alike.
But, eventually ending up in jail was a big eye-opener, and people ask me what's it like to be in jail, and literally it's one of those situations where if you haven't been there, you really can't appreciate what it's like to be locked in, and people whose backgrounds were very different to my own. I just come from an ordinary middle-class family, and guys who had very tough backgrounds, and so you sort of stand out, and they because normally the prison protocol is you don't ask each other what you're in for. You just got to find out. You never say, because somebody's in there for murder, you don't go and ask them. So, but for me it was different. I obviously looked pretty harmless, because as soon as somebody heard why I was in there, everybody was asking me, I couldn't believe it, what I was in there for. So, it gave lots of interesting conversations, and what amazed me was how supportive so many of the guys were, and sympathetic, and agreed. They said, yes, we agree with you. I mean, the average prison population is more pro-life than non-prison population.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. So it's just one of those curious things of life, perhaps because, I don't know, that they've had a hard life, that they recognise the value of life. But a lot of the guys, that's not to say that there weren't occasions where guys were going to beat me up because I was in there for being a pro-life. That happened also.
Oh, gosh.
But more friendliness than unfriendliness overall. So,
And you were telling me about a time that you met someone and you thought, well, hang on, he doesn't look like the rest of these guys. And you found out that he was a lawyer in there for white-collar theft. Mm-hmm. And you ended up actually getting some legal advice from him that helped you get out of some of your fines.
Yep. The first day I was in jail, we met each other, and because we were different to the rest of the guys, we sort of became friends, and he did. He gave me advice that I used the next time I went to court. It wasn't on the substantive issue of abortion per se. It got me off on a technical issue. But the curious thing was, at that point, I had over $15,000 in fines. And because I got off on that case, I wanted to appeal about those previous convictions, because the one I got off on meant that the previous ones I should have been able to have them overturned. But at that time, if you didn't appeal a conviction within 30 days, you lost your right to appeal. So they were all more than 30 days old, so I couldn't appeal any of them. So somebody suggested, I think they'd seen it on a movie, write to the governor and ask for the governor to remit your fines. I thought, oh, well, it's worth a try. So I wrote to the governor, the governor of Queensland. She wasn't any sympathetic person to pro-life issues, but I wrote. It took 2 years to get an answer, and much to my surprise, half my fines were remitted. I had been convicted of two things, one of disobeying a lawful direction and obstructing police, and all my fines for obstructing police were remitted and written off. So I thought, that's great. And I thought, well, why didn't the other half get remitted as well? So I wrote back, took another 2 years to get a reply. And the second time it was just no, they wouldn't do it. But at least I got half of them remitted.
Oh, no, that's great. I was just going to say, so the last time, so you did 60 of these sit-ins, and then the last time you were in jail was 2012, is that right? And since you were released in 2012, you continued on your work. And it wasn't long after that you went to Tasmania. And the reason you went to Tasmania was because that was the first place that they introduced the bubble zones. So Can you tell us a bit about that, why you would go to the efforts of going out of your state to Tasmania, and also, because I guess the main part of your work was the signboards at this time, holding up the signboards in front of abortion clinics.
Right. Now, what happened was, as you said, in 2013, Tasmania said that they introduced legislation that would mean that nobody could do anything within 150 metres of an abortion clinic, anything that could be regarded as seeking to deter someone from having an abortion. So you couldn't be there to offer help, you couldn't be there to protest, anything. And we were concerned that because that was something that I'd been doing all through the years, was going outside the abortion clinics offering people to help, and people had turned away. Lives had been saved by having been there. And but now they were saying you couldn't be there any longer. And so when this was the first state to say they were going to do this, and we thought, well, we've got to try to challenge this straight away, or if it's not, the other states will just follow suit and you won't be able to go to any abortion clinics in the country. And so we met with a group of pro-lifers down there in Tasmania. My wife is from Tasmania, and we happened to be there at the time, and we met with them. And I said this to them, and they said, yep, we agree, we've got to do something about this. And so it was decided that in 2014, prior to their state elections, we would go, and a group of us would stand outside the abortion clinic. There were only two of them in Hobart, and challenge this law. As it got closer to the date, because I'd come back to Brisbane, they rang me and said, oh, it doesn't look like many people will be joining us outside the abortion clinic. And then a couple of days before, they said, looks like you're the only person that's going to be doing this. Will you still come? And I said, well, yes, because it was still important that this law be challenged. So I went down there and was arrested. It's a long, complicated story, and I won't try to go into it all, but it took a couple of years back and forth, and a lot of crazy things happened. I've discovered that people in Tasmania dislike pro-lifers even more than those in Queensland. I was violently attacked several occasions, and it was pretty difficult.
In fact, I just want to read. Can I read out a part of your chapter that's going to appear in this book? So you said, suddenly, though, a man appeared beside me. I recalled having seen him just a few minutes earlier when he had driven past and abused me, and he yelled at me, and he grabbed the baby picture and threw it into the street. He then shoved me, which caused me to drop the other sign. When I stood up after picking up the sign, he then struck me hard on the throat, which caused me to stagger backwards, causing me to almost fall over. I turned and walked away, and he, while continuing to yell, walked off. And then later on, you say that he came up to you again, and he struck you hard in the throat again. And to your amazement, apart from a few hours of discomfort, you did not have any ongoing problems from the blows. So that was good, but it wasn't good that you got hit there. So this kind of, have you had many more physical attacks as you've been on the sides?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that was probably the most violent physical one. But yes, other lesser physical, but yeah, people spraying paint over me and things like that. So
yeah. And again, this is probably because they've hidden the idea that this was a human that they aborted or that they were part of, and they really don't want it in their face. And so that would be my understanding of their motivation.
I expect so.
So just to summarize the chapter in your book that gives the whole story, the story of your time in Tasmania, could you summarize it for us? After that point, you go there, you challenge it.
Ah, yes. Well, I had to make multiple trips because as I say, it's very complicated. It's a bit difficult to give all the details. But the end result was that there was a court case and I lost, and I was fined $3,000 for promoting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the streets of Hobart. So
wow. So
yeah, it's pretty ironic that even though Australia is signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, our courts can say it's illegal to promote them on our streets. So clearly they see that they are pro-life, though, because that was taken to be a deterrence to somebody having an abortion. That's why they found me guilty. And so that was in the court in Tasmania. We then appealed that decision to the High Court of Australia, our highest court, and it wasn't until 2018 that we got to the High Court of Australia, and the case was heard before the full bench of the High Court, 7 judges. And they had 36 lawyers arrayed against us. Every state of Australia sent, and every territory sent 3 lawyers, and plus others. And we had our 2 lawyers against these 36, and we lost. So it was very disappointing. All 7 voted against, found against us, and it is. And
were you in jail at any point during that? Were you released on bail?
For these, I didn't risk being in jail. I came close, but no, I didn't. And
and what was that court case? What was that like? What were you saying? This is a freedom of speech issue, a human rights issue, freedom of speech?
No, it was a freedom of speech. And
how did they argue against that?
Well, you see, in Australia, we don't have a Bill of Rights, and so there is no constitutional freedom of speech. It's not guaranteed, unlike the United States, where it's guaranteed. We don't have that. And the best we've got is an inferred freedom of political speech. And so as I say, that's only an inference. That's not clear in the Constitution, and it only refers to political speech. And so my lawyer had to argue that I fitted within that, and they said, no, I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wow. And now there's bubble zones effective across Australia?
Everywhere, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so since then you continue on your work, not outside abortion clinics, partly because the abortions are not done in the clinics anymore. Well,
I'll clarify that. As we said earlier, there were 4 abortion clinics in Brisbane that did surgical abortions. In 2000, and see, I meant to mention this earlier, back then when we started these direct actions, abortion was illegal in Queensland. And that's the paradox of it all, is that in court we clearly showed that they were operating illegally.
You were still the one that went to jail.
Yeah, that's right. I had a police prosecutor say to me after the case, he said, I couldn't sleep after what I heard in court yesterday. And he said, I will never prosecute you again in court. Because he said these places operate illegally. He told me that he had written to his superiors and saying to them, these abortion clinics have got to be investigated because they clearly operate illegally. It didn't matter. And, and it doesn't surprise me that, because I would say that's corruption, that these places operate illegally quite openly. Advertising themselves in the yellow pages, but abortion's illegal. So, that's just ridiculous. But I just remind myself that how many police women, how many policemen, the women have had an abortion, or their wife has had an abortion, or their mother or their daughter, how many judges, their wife or their daughter, have had abortions. That is so widespread in our society. So many people have been implicated by, consenting to it, going along with it, helping, having an abortion, that so many people want to just cover it up and don't want it talked about, that it's hardly surprising that, as you said, I'm the one who ends up in jail, even though it's illegal. But in 2018, abortion was legalised in Queensland, and so now it is legal, and it is legal up to birth. Many people just do not believe that. I tell people that when I'm in the streets, and they just refuse to believe it. But it's true. Up to 22 weeks of pregnancy, you do not have to give a reason. The abortion just has to be given to you up to 22 weeks, and then up to birth. Effectively, if you can find 2 doctors who are willing to do it, you can have it. And so it is legal right up to the point of birth.
Wow. And I want to know, what is the general opinion of the public? Because you interact with the public, as you say, 3 times a week, you're out on the street. I don't think we've covered that yet, but you had told me earlier, 3 times a week, you're in the morning out the street holding these signboards. And so instead of outside the abortion clinics, you're at the busiest intersections you can find. So as many people as possible see these signs, because you're wanting to change the hearts and the minds of the people. Because if the policies are going to change, the people need to change with them or before them. And and I've had the fortune of coming out with you twice. Once was about 8 years ago, and once was recently, just last week. And the first time I came out with you, I remember someone threw a Coke can at you, a full Coke can. They narrowly missed, which was good. But the second time, we had a lot more positive interactions. And it seems like each time you go out, there is positive and negative. There were people coming up to us and thanking you and saying they'd seen you before. And what was really interesting about that for me was we were out with another colleague of yours, Jim, who goes out with you regularly, and was the encouragement that both of you received from that. It was really encouraging for people just to wave or thumbs up, and that was very interesting for me to see that that was actually really encouraging and something useful for you. So my question is, what's the best responses you've seen on the street? Can you maybe give an example? And then maybe give an example of what we've heard of, one of the worst, a punch to the throat, but maybe give an example of one of the best.
Oh, well, I mean, it is, people who will, probably the best is when the lady came up to me and she took out her phone and showed me a picture of her baby. And she said, I went to go to the abortion clinic, and because you were there, and this is the baby now.
Wow. So you met her outside of an abortion clinic?
Well, I didn't even remember seeing her, but she knew me, and she just showed me that. And another time a guy came running across the road, and that's never a good sign when someone's running at you. And I thought, uh-oh, here we go. And but he raced up to me, he said, I just want to tell you, he said, I'm so glad I saw you, he said, because a year ago, he said, my daughter and her boyfriend were on their way to the abortion clinic and they saw you. They didn't stop, but they just saw the sign, and they said, no, he said, I've got a 3-month-old or 6-month-old baby, grandchild.
Wow.
And I just want to say thank you. So they're the best ones. It doesn't happen often enough, but it has happened.
Wow.
But as you say, there are people who show signs of support, but proportionally out of the number of people going past, they make up only a tiny number. The fact is that most people just don't want to know about this. They just want to turn a blind eye. They want to pretend it's not happening. I think if people had their wish, it would just go on in the background and nobody would talk about it. They want it to be there as a convenience to suit them when they want it, but they don't want to think about it. And when somebody comes out and is standing in front of them, reminding them of it, they just don't want to know. And so there are those that will react very negatively when they see you and attack you, but most people just turn their head away.
It's got to be at least 95% of the people. Yeah. I hope so.
And it's very sad that people aren't willing to. And of that proportion who just say nothing, a significant number of them are probably Christians, and that's what really is sad. That so many Christians are willing to just turn a blind eye to this.
And this is something needs to be done in society. It needs to be done in the church. I mean, where do you think we go from here, Graham? Like there's been pro-life movements going, especially since Roe versus Wade, and that having an impact on other nations. And we saw that overturned in the US recently, which seemed to be a positive, but there still seems like a long way to go in the nation of Australia, in a lot of the Western nations in the world, like generally the Western world accepts abortion. Some celebrate it, some tolerate it, some say it's a necessary evil. How do we change? How do we change public perception, policy? Where do we go from here?
That's a very good question, Scott. I wish I knew the answer. In some ways, Australia is similar to America, but in other ways, I think Australians are quite different. You know, the Americans tend to be very strong at both ends. We tend to be very much in the middle and much more easygoing, should be right sort of attitude. To get people motivated to take something seriously, I think is much more difficult in Australia. And as far as getting, because if we can't get the church motivated and caring, then we're not going to get the rest of the society moving. And one of the things that I have suggested to the churches in the past, and as far as I'm aware, not a single church has taken it up, but I would advocate that a very simple thing that churches could do would be to put up a sign on their property in a prominent position that simply says, pregnant, worried, we will help you, and a phone number. And if every church was working in conjunction with a group like Priceless House,
you could pass them on if you couldn't take it as a church yourself.
But see, they would need to be involved to help because Priceless House can't
do everything.
Yeah, true. We need to work together, and Priceless House wants to work with the churches. Yeah. Because so many women, my wife tells me, they say, because she also does post-abortion counselling, and she says, the women say, I felt like I had no alternative. I had no choice. Nobody would help me. The guy said he would leave me if I didn't have the abortion, and they say I had nowhere to turn.
Wow.
But if every church, they saw that sign on there, they would say, well, somebody does care. Somebody will help me. I will, and as I said, Priceless House has trouble getting the word out that they exist. But if every church had a sign up saying that, people would know that Christians do care, Christians will help. It would make a world of difference. And as far as I'm aware, though, not a single church has done it.
Wow. It's only pastors listening. The signboard, pregnant, worried.
Pregnant, ? Worried, ? We will help you.
Love it.
Simple as that.
And connect with Priceless House.
Well,
give
just
you
a phone
instructions.
number for the church, but then working together with Priceless, give them the help that they need.
Awesome. And if there is someone watching this who is in that situation, they're pregnant and they're worried, find a local church. If you can't find one, if you're in Australia, Priceless House.
Yes, it's pricelesshouse.org.
Excellent. So if you're in Australia, that's a place you can go. Yeah. They're going to give you help.
Yes. And see, this is the thing, though, that, abortion clinics will only do one thing for you. They'll kill your child. We will provide all the assistance that we can to help you, practical assistance, counselling, everything to try to assist. And it's free. And
And if you're not in Australia, there's organisations similar.
Will be everywhere.
So what you need to Google is emergency pregnancy.
Something like that.
Counselling. Emergency pregnancy counselling.
Or pro-life counselling.
Pro-life counselling. Yeah. Look into the other options. There are other people that are willing to help. And so we've said about the church, we've said people that are pregnant. What about someone that's listening to this, Graham? And what would you say to a person that's taking a different view on this as a non-Christian at the moment? How would you encourage them?
As a non-Christian?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they've got to ask that same question about what does abortion do? I mean, all of us as human beings, we have to have an answer to that question. And, it truly the miracle of life, a new human life coming into being, Christian or non-Christian, we must all be able to see that that is a fantastic miracle that every new life is. And to say that they can just be thrown away as if they're a piece of rubbish, I think that all of us can see that is wrong. And I would encourage the non-Christian to think about that. Yeah.
And finally, Graham, I'm been very excited to see, and I've talked to you about this briefly, a newer, younger generation of pro-life activists, people really understanding that this is an issue here in Australia and abroad as well, rising up. We talked about Joanna Howe, I think it is, and other people getting on social media and talking about this. How would you encourage them a younger person that's maybe not involved yet, but they see the issue and they say, I want to do something. They might be like you were 40 years ago and just learning about the issue. What would you say to them?
Oh, well, yes, get in touch with people who are already doing something and see how you can be involved. And I've turned 70 this year, and I've been a long time on the streets and things, and I'd be very happy to have younger people join me. Not that I want to give up, but it'd be great to see a new generation joining me, yes.
Yeah, I know only the 2 times I've come with you, you've been very thankful to having me with you, and you're very open to having anyone join you there.
Especially young ladies, because I always cop it because they call me a crusty old white man. So
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that some young ladies rising up with a voice, giving a voice to the voiceless, and that's really exciting to see, and we're praying for that. So, and if people do want to get in contact with you, we've mentioned already your website, Atheism for Kids and Teens.
That's it, .com.
Atheism for Kids and Teens, and we'll put that link in the description below.
That's for that one, but I also have another one called protect-life.info.
And we're also going to be giving this book away, Is Human Life Special? So we'll be giving an ebook version of this away. All you need to do is click on the link in the description and follow the instructions. And so this talks about the issues of abortion, it talks about the issues of euthanasia, and gives you a theological and philosophical viewpoint on that. So thank you, Graham. It's been really good to hear some of your story, and we're very thankful for the work you do. And it was really good to see Christians passing by, encouraging you. And we pray that more people would get involved with this work. Is there any final things you'd like to say to people listening?
I would just encourage everybody to be prepared to take this issue seriously. It's a highly emotive issue. People find it difficult to talk about calmly, but don't be put off by that. Be brave, be willing to address it, because literally human lives are being lost because we're being silent about it.
And maybe there is some of the really good stories, like you were sharing with me earlier, where lives have been saved because you were willing to speak up. You were willing to say what was true. Thank you so much, Graham.
Thank you.